Fairfield never slept. Even on Thursday evening, the lights of the business district's skyscrapers pierced the November darkness, and expensive cars glided through the polished streets like sharks in search of prey. This city had 800,000 inhabitants, but only a select few knew where to find what couldn't be bought in ordinary stores. Savannah Drake adjusted her Versace dress and assessed her reflection in the elevator mirror. The 28th floor of the Grand Imperial Hotel was a place where only those who could afford $1,000 a night could meet. She knew her worth and never haggled. After all, quality comes at a price. Savannah was a work of art, created by her own hands. Every detail from her flawless makeup to her expensive jewelry was carefully thought out. She studied her clients like a surgeon studies anatomy. She knew that Robert Stanford, the CEO of a large corporation, preferred French champagne in conversations about politics. She knew that Senator Davison liked her to wear something red. She knew that they all needed the illusion that she belonged only to them. "You're late again," Robert grumbled as he opened the door to his room. His gray hair was tousled, his tie loose. "The meeting ran late." "I'm sorry, dear." Savannah slipped past him into the room, leaving a trail of expensive perfume. "But you know, good things are worth waiting for." Robert poured himself a whiskey and sat down in an armchair, watching her settle gracefully on the sofa. "Sometimes I think you enjoy making people wait." Savannah smiled, that special smile that was worth more than gold. "Isn't that why you keep calling me instead of everyone else?" She was right, and they both knew it. Savannah Drake wasn't just an escort. She was an experience you couldn't get anywhere else. She knew how to make a man feel like he was the most important person in the world, even if she forgot his name an hour later. In another part of Fairfield, in the respectable neighborhood of Oakland Hills, Rachel Morgan was checking her students' homework. St. Agnes Private School prided itself on its high standards, and Rachel strove to live up to them. At 31, she was a model of respectability, a loving wife, a caring mother, and a respected teacher. "Mom, can I watch TV a little longer?" 7-year-old Emmy peeked into the living room where Rachel was working at the coffee table. "Half an hour, then bedtime," Rachel replied without looking up from her notebooks. "And don't forget to brush your teeth." The Morgan home was the embodiment of the American dream, a 2-story colonial mansion with white columns, a manicured lawn, and 2 cars in the garage. Tom had invested a lot of money in this house, considering it a symbol of his success in banking. Rachel sometimes felt like another exhibit in his collection of achievements. "How's work?" Tom asked, coming down the stairs in his home suit. Even at home, he looked like he was getting ready for a business meeting. "Same as usual." Jason Cole's parents complained about his grades again. Rachel put down her pen and rubbed her tired eyes. "They think that because they pay for his education, their son should automatically be a straight-A student." Tom poured himself a glass of water and sat down next to his wife. "Maybe we should try to work with them. Cole Sr. is a big client of the bank." Rachel looked at her husband in surprise. "Are you seriously suggesting that I inflate his grades for the sake of your business interests?" "I'm just saying that sometimes you have to be flexible," Tom shrugged. "We live in the real world, Rachel. Connections matter." The words hung in the air, creating a familiar tension between the couple. Rachel often found herself thinking that she had married a completely different person. Or perhaps she had simply overlooked these traits, blinded by the stability and security he offered. Across town, in the small but cozy workshop of Collins Auto, Dave Collins was finishing up repairs on his last car. At 45, he looked older than his years. Divorce, loneliness, and hard work had taken their toll. But business was good. A network of 4 auto repair shops provided a steady income, allowing him to afford certain pleasures. One of those pleasures was Savannah. Dave had met her a year and a half ago through a discreet service recommended by one of his customers. At first, their meetings were rare, once a month, no more. But gradually, he began to call her more often. Savannah was unlike any other woman he had dated since his divorce. She knew how to listen without judging. She knew how to make him feel interesting and successful. "Are you thinking about her again?" asked Jim, his senior mechanic, wiping his hands on an oily rag. Dave tried to appear indifferent. "Who?" "The girl you've been seeing." Don't pretend I don't know what you're talking about. You've been walking on air for the last 6 months after those business dinners of yours. Jim had worked with Dave for 10 years and knew him better than anyone. He had seen how his divorce had devastated his boss and was happy that he had finally found someone who made him happy. It wasn't his place to judge the nature of their relationship. "She's special," Dave admitted as he locked up the cash register. "Sometimes I feel like she understands me better than Lisa did in 12 years of marriage." Jim nodded, though deep down something bothered him. He had seen Dave change, become more demanding, impatient when Savannah was unavailable. It seemed more like an addiction than a healthy relationship. That same night, Savannah sat in her spacious apartment in the upscale Platinum Towers complex, scrolling through messages from clients. Dave had texted again, the third time that day. She cringed as she read his overly emotional texts. He was getting too attached, which was always a bad sign in her line of work. Rule number 1 in her profession was never to let clients think the relationship was real. But Dave paid well and regularly, and that meant stability. Savannah was used to a certain standard of living and had no intention of giving it up. Her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello? Good evening. My name is Marcus Gray. I got your number from a mutual acquaintance. I'd like to discuss the possibility of meeting." Savannah switched into work mode. The voice sounded educated and confident, exactly what she looked for in clients. "Sure, tell me a little about yourself and what you're interested in." They spoke for 20 minutes. Marcus turned out to be a lawyer at a large firm who had recently moved to Fairfield. He was looking for a social companion, code that Savannah understood perfectly. "I have a charity reception next Saturday," he explained. "It's for a children's charity. I need a companion who can hold a conversation with my colleagues' spouses. It'll be $1,500 plus the cost of a dress and jewelry," Savannah said without hesitation. "No problem. I'll send the details to your email." After the conversation ended, Savannah felt a rush of satisfaction. A new client, a high-paying event, an opportunity to show herself in society. It was exactly what she needed to expand her client base. She could already picture the event. A luxurious hotel, influential people, expensive outfits. Savannah loved events like this. They fed her ego and opened up new opportunities. In places like this, she felt like a queen, watching men steal glances at her while their wives envied her dress. Savannah Drake knew her worth and never doubted her ability to get what she wanted. In a world where everything was for sale, she had learned to be both the commodity and the buyer. And as long as it paid the bills, she was happy with her life. But even Savannah couldn't have predicted that in a few days, her world would be turned upside down when she met a woman who would force her to rethink all the rules of the game. The grand ballroom of the Fairfield Palace Hotel sparkled with crystal and gold. A charity reception for a children's aid fund had brought together the cream of city society, bankers, lawyers, politicians, and their impeccably dressed spouses. Savannah entered the hall on the arm of Marcus Gray, and several men involuntarily followed her with their eyes. Her emerald-colored dress by a famous designer perfectly accentuated her figure, and her diamond earrings caught the light from the chandeliers. Savannah knew she looked stunning and enjoyed the attention. She was made for events like this. "Impressive," Marcus commented, watching the reactions of those around them. "I think I'll be the envy of many men tonight." Savannah smiled her trademark enigmatic smile. "Isn't that the point?" They made their way to the bar where Marcus ordered champagne. Savannah scanned the room with a professional eye, assessing potential clients. Rich, middle-aged, divorced men, influential businessmen. Sooner or later, she might need all of them. "Marcus, I didn't expect to see you here." A man in his 50s in an expensive suit approached them. "And who is this charming lady?" "Let me introduce you. Savannah Drake. Savannah, this is Richard Blackwood, a partner in our firm." Savannah extended her hand with a graceful gesture. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Blackwood." "The pleasure is all mine," he said gallantly, kissing her hand. "I hope Marcus is showing you all the sights of our city?" "Oh yes, he's a wonderful guide," Savannah said, casting a look full of feigned tenderness at Marcus. She was a master at creating illusions. On the other side of the room, Rachel Morgan felt out of place. Tom had insisted that they come to this reception, It was important to be seen in society, as he put it. Rachel would have preferred to stay home with the children, but Tom was adamant. "Smile," he whispered in her ear as they approached a group of his colleagues. "You look like you're at a funeral." Rachel tried to feign enthusiasm, but the small talk was exhausting. Conversations about real estate, investments, and vacation plans seemed empty compared to the problems her students faced every day. At school, she worked with children from disadvantaged families, and the contrast between their reality and this luxury was painful. Rachel teaches at a private school. Tom introduced her to another group of acquaintances. A very noble profession. There was a note of condescension in his tone, as if he were apologizing for his wife not having a more prestigious job. Rachel clenched her teeth, forcing a smile. "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom," she muttered and headed for the exit. Once in the hallway, Rachel leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. The bracelet Tom had given her for their anniversary felt heavy on her wrist. Everything in their life was heavy. The expectations, the obligations, the need to live up to an image. "Looks like someone needs some fresh air," came a melodious voice. Rachel turned and saw a woman in an emerald dress. Even from a distance, it was obvious that the stranger belonged to a completely different world, a world of luxury and self-confidence. "I'm sorry, I'm just a little tired," Rachel replied, feeling awkward in her modest dark blue dress. "These events can be exhausting," Savannah agreed, studying Rachel. There was something intriguing about this woman, a vulnerability hidden beneath a mask of politeness. "I'm Savannah." "Rachel," she introduced herself, unwittingly captivated by the stranger's confidence. "That's a beautiful name. It suits your eyes." Savannah took a step closer. "Are you here alone?" "With my husband," Rachel replied quickly, but for some reason felt the need to explain. "He's a banker. He thinks it's important to attend events like this." "And what do you think?" The question caught Rachel off guard. No one had ever asked her opinion on such matters. Everyone always assumed she shared her husband's views. "Honestly, I'd rather be home with my kids," she admitted, surprised at her own candor. Savannah smiled. Not the social smile she had been wearing in the ballroom, but something more genuine. "So you're a mother. How many children?" "2. Emmy is 7 and Ben is 5. Rachel's face lit up when she talked about her children. It must be hard to balance work and family. "Sometimes," Rachel hesitated. "Do you have children?" "No." Savannah shook her head. "My life isn't really suited to a family." There was a note of sadness in her voice that Rachel couldn't help but notice. For the first time that evening, she felt genuine interest in the person she was talking to. "Savannah, honey, I've been looking everywhere for you." Marcus appeared, interrupting the conversation. "I want you to meet the mayor." "Of course." Savannah turned to Rachel. "It was nice meeting you, Rachel. I hope we'll see each other again." Rachel watched Savannah walk away, feeling a strange emptiness. In the few minutes they had spoken, this woman had made her feel more alive than she had in months. A week later, Dave Collins sat in his office, checking his phone for the 10th time that day. Savannah hadn't responded to his messages in 3 days. She usually responded quickly, even if she was busy. Her silence bothered him more than he was willing to admit. "Boss, are you okay?" Jim peeked into the office. "You look worried." "Everything's fine," Dave lied. "Just a lot of work." But that wasn't true. Over the past year and a half, Savannah had become the center of his world. He planned his week around their dates and saved money so he could see her more often. Other women no longer interested him. Dave understood that their relationship had certain boundaries, but he gradually began to believe that there was something special between them. Savannah always listened to him so attentively, remembered the details of their conversations, and took an interest in his life. Weren't those signs of real feelings? His phone finally rang. "Savannah." "Hi, beautiful," he replied, trying to hide his relief. "I was starting to worry." "Sorry, I've had a crazy week." Savannah's voice sounded distracted. "Lots of work stuff." Dave grimaced at the mention of her work. He preferred not to think about Savannah seeing other men. In his fantasies, he convinced himself that she was only doing it for the money and that she only had real feelings for him. Maybe we can see each other tonight, he suggested. I booked a room at the Ritz. I can't. I have plans. A short silence hung between them. Dave felt the familiar pang of jealousy. What plans? Dave, we talked about this, Savannah said, a note of irritation creeping into her voice. I have other commitments. Commitments, he repeated bitterly. Is that what you call it now? Don't start, please, Savannah said wearily. We can meet tomorrow. After she hung up, Dave sat for a long time staring into space. He knew he was getting too attached, but he couldn't stop himself. Savannah was like a drug. The more he got, the more he wanted. At the same time, Savannah was sitting in the expensive restaurant Le Bern across from Rachel Morgan. After their meeting at the reception, she couldn't get that woman out of her head. There was something in her eyes, sadness, dissatisfaction, a search for something more. Savannah found out where Rachel worked and accidentally bumped into her near the school. The invitation to have lunch together was accepted with surprising readiness. This place is incredible, Rachel said, looking around the restaurant's exquisite interior. I've never been here before. I like trying new places, Savannah replied, studying the menu. Life's too short to limit yourself. Rachel nodded, even though her own life was full of limitations. Work, family, social obligations, everything was scheduled and predictable. Tell me about your job, Savannah asked. It must be interesting working with children. Rachel perked up. Yes, although it can be very difficult at times. Many of my students come from troubled families. I try to be more than just a teacher to them. But I don't know. An example that life can be different. Savannah listened attentively, but her interest was far from altruistic. She saw Rachel as the perfect target, lonely in her marriage, insecure, craving attention and understanding. Women like that made the most devoted mistresses. Does your husband support your work? Savannah asked innocently. Rachel hesitated before answering. Tom thinks I could find something more lucrative. He doesn't really understand why I waste my time on kids who, in his opinion, will never amount to anything. That sounds harsh. Savannah leaned closer, her hand lightly touching Rachel's. But you don't agree with him, do you? No, Rachel said firmly, not removing her hand. Every child deserves a chance. Savannah smiled. I like your passion. It's a rare quality. Rachel felt her cheeks flush. When was the last time someone called her passionate? Tom had long taken her for granted, and their relationship had become more of a business partnership than a marriage. What do you do? Rachel asked. Savannah was ready for this question. I'm an image consultant. I help people look and feel better. It was a subtle half-truth. Savannah did help people feel better, just in a slightly different way. That explains why you always look so flawless, Rachel said admiringly. Appearance is the first impression, Savannah replied, and first impressions can change your whole life. Lunch lasted 2 hours. Savannah skillfully guided the conversation, getting Rachel to talk about herself, her dreams, and her disappointments. By the end of the meeting, she knew more about Rachel's life than her own husband did. I have to go, Rachel finally said, glancing at her watch. I have to pick up the kids from school. Of course, Savannah called the waiter. It's on me. But no objections. I enjoyed spending time with you. As they parted, Savannah hugged Rachel. The hug was a little longer and tighter than is customary between new acquaintances. Will I see you soon? Rachel asked hopefully. Definitely, Savannah promised. On the way home, Rachel couldn't stop thinking about Savannah. This woman exuded a confidence and independence that she so lacked in her own life. Around her, Rachel felt interesting and important. At home, her usual routine awaited her, helping the kids with their homework, making dinner, listening to Tom complain about work. But now it all seemed particularly dull compared to her exciting lunch with Savannah. Savannah, meanwhile, returned to her apartment feeling the satisfaction of a hunter who had found the perfect prey. Rachel Morgan was exactly what she needed. A beautiful, intelligent, frustrated woman ready for change. Seduction would be a fun game. What's more, a relationship with a woman was a new experience for Savannah, promising interesting sensations. She had always considered herself bisexual, but had never seriously explored that side of her personality. Rachel could be the perfect way to broaden her horizons. Savannah's phone rang. It was Dave again. "What?" she replied more sharply than she intended. "You said you were free today." His voice sounded hurt. Savannah rolled her eyes. Dave was becoming increasingly intrusive, and it was starting to annoy her, but he still paid well. "Fine. Meet me at 8 at the usual place." Hanging up, Savannah looked at herself in the mirror. Today had been a good day. She had a new toy in Rachel, and a reliable source of income in Dave. Life was beautiful when you knew how to control it. 3 weeks had passed since their first dinner, and Savannah had methodically strengthened her position in Rachel's life. They met twice a week, either for lunch at trendy cafes or at cultural events that Savannah always knew how to find. Each meeting was carefully planned for maximum effect. "You're late again," Tom said when Rachel walked into the house at 6:30 in the evening. "Sorry, I was with a friend," Rachel replied, hanging her coat in the closet. "What friend? You never mentioned any friends." Rachel froze. Tom was right. She didn't have any close friends. Work and family took up all her time, and the social acquaintances in their circle were more of an obligation than a choice. "I met her recently, Savannah. She's a very interesting woman." "Savannah?" Tom looked up from his newspaper, showing unexpected interest. "Drake, what about her?" "Nothing special," he said, returning to his reading, but Rachel noticed his shoulders tense. "I'm just curious where you've been meeting new people." Rachel didn't pursue the subject. Lately, every conversation with her husband had turned into an interrogation or criticism. Savannah was the only bright spot in her gray routine. At that moment, in the trendy Sky Lounge bar, Savannah was sitting across from a young banker named Alex. He was in his 30s, had recently been promoted, and was actively spending his new income on entertainment. The perfect client for a one-time encounter. "You're incredible," he said, clearly impressed by her appearance and manner. "How do you manage to look so flawless?" "The secret is self-respect," Savannah replied, taking a sip of her martini. "When you value yourself, others start to do the same." Alex nodded, committing every word to memory. Savannah watched him with slight contempt. Men were so predictable. A few right words, the right posture, a meaningful look, and they were ready to give everything they had. Her phone vibrated. A message from Rachel. "Thanks for today. I haven't felt this alive in a long time." Savannah smiled. The plan was working perfectly. Rachel was falling into the trap faster than expected. "Sorry, I have to reply to an important message," she said to Alex and quickly typed a reply. "I had a great time too. You're a special woman, Rachel." Simple words, but Savannah knew their power. Rachel was clearly lacking attention and recognition in her marriage. A few sincere compliments, and she was ready to take any risk for new sensations. The next day, Dave Collins couldn't concentrate on his work. Savannah had canceled their meeting again, citing unexpected circumstances. This was the third time in 2 weeks. This had never happened before. "Jim!" he shouted as he left the office. "I'm going out for a couple of hours. If anything urgent comes up, call my cell." "Boss, we have 3 cars in for diagnostics today. You can handle it without me," Dave said, putting on his jacket. He knew Savannah's address. He had never gone there uninvited. It was an unwritten rule in their relationship. But today, rules didn't matter. He needed to know what was going on. Dave parked across from the upscale Platinum Towers complex and waited. Half an hour later, his patience was rewarded. Savannah emerged from the building accompanied by a woman. They walked close together, talking animatedly. Dave took a closer look at Savannah's companion. The woman was attractive, but she didn't have the luxury and defiance that Savannah exuded. She looked ordinary, like a suburban housewife. They got into Savannah's car, a red BMW that Dave had helped her buy 6 months ago. The car pulled away and Dave followed, trying to keep his distance. Savannah and her companion arrived at a high-end shopping mall. Dave watched from a cafe across the street as they shopped, tried on clothes, and laughed. There was an intimacy between them that made his heart ache with jealousy. "She's just a friend," he told himself. "Women always act like that with each other." But when Savannah hugged her companion goodbye at the car, the embrace seemed too long, too tender to Dave. Something was wrong. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. The day with Savannah had been magical. They had picked out new clothes, had dinner at an Italian restaurant, talked about books and movies. For the first time in years, Rachel felt interesting, desirable. Savannah knew how to make her feel special. She remembered every little thing: Rachel's favorite color, her food preferences, stories about her children. When she was with Savannah, Rachel forgot about her insecurities and limitations. "Can't sleep?" Tom rolled over in bed. "Just thinking," Rachel replied. "About what?" Rachel hesitated. What could she tell him? How Savannah's touch made her heart beat faster. About how she caught herself thinking about kissing another woman? "Work," she lied. "Maybe you should look for something better? There's a customer service manager position open at the bank. They pay twice as much." "I don't want to work at a bank, Tom." "Why not?" "It's more prestigious with better career opportunities." "Because it's not me," Rachel said, more sharply than she had intended. "Not everything in life is measured by money." Tom fell silent, but the tension in the air was palpable. They argued more and more often over little things, and each conflict showed how far apart they had grown. 2 days later, Savannah decided to take the next step. She invited Rachel to her apartment to look at her art collection. It was a transparent excuse, and both women knew it. "Wow," Rachel exclaimed as she entered the spacious apartment. "This is incredible." Panoramic windows, designer furniture, artwork on the walls. Everything spoke of impeccable taste and big money. Rachel felt like a character in a glossy magazine. "Would you like some wine?" Savannah offered, opening a bottle of expensive Chardonnay. "Maybe I shouldn't. I'm driving." "Stay the night," Savannah said it so naturally, as if she were inviting her to stay and watch a movie. "I have a guest room." Rachel felt her pulse quicken. "I can't. The kids, my husband." "Tell them you're staying at a friend's house," Savannah said, filling 2 glasses and handing one to Rachel. "Sometimes you have to think about yourself." Rachel took the glass with trembling hands. She knew she was crossing a line, but she couldn't stop herself. Being with Savannah made her feel more alive than she had ever felt before. They sat down on the sofa, and Savannah began to talk about the paintings. Her voice was hypnotic, her hands gesturing gracefully as she explained the details of the compositions. Rachel listened, but couldn't concentrate on the words. She was mesmerized by Savannah's lips. "Are you even listening to me?" Savannah laughed, noticing her friend's distraction. "I'm sorry, you're so beautiful," Rachel blurted out, blushing at her own boldness. Savannah moved closer. "You're beautiful too, Rachel, but you don't see it. My husband hasn't noticed it in a long time." "That's his problem," Savannah said, lightly touching Rachel's cheek. "Every woman wants to feel desired." A silence filled the air, full of unspoken desires. Rachel felt the warmth of Savannah's hand on her cheek and knew that something was about to happen that would change her life forever. "I've never been with a woman," she whispered. "I know." Savannah leaned closer. "Trust me." The kiss was gentle, exploratory. Savannah took her time, allowing Rachel to get used to the new sensations. When they broke apart, Rachel's eyes were filled with tears, not from sadness, but from overwhelming emotion. "What's happening to me?" she asked. "You're just allowing yourself to feel," Savannah replied, stroking her hair. "There's nothing wrong with that." That night, Rachel felt truly alive for the first time in many years. Savannah was a patient teacher, introducing her to new aspects of intimacy. But for Savannah, it was just another successful hunt. She got what she wanted. In the morning, Rachel woke up in a strange bed, feeling like her world had been turned upside down. Savannah was sleeping next to her, and seeing her peaceful face made Rachel feel a rush of tenderness mixed with horror at the realization of what had happened. "Good morning, beautiful." Savannah opened her eyes and smiled. "How did you sleep?" "I need to go home," Rachel said frantically, jumping out of bed. "The kids will wake up and look for me." "Rachel, stop!" Savannah sat down and took her hand. "Yesterday was wonderful. Don't ruin it with guilt." "But I'm married. I have children. What am I doing?" "You're alive." Savannah pulled her back onto the bed. "You're allowing yourself to be happy." Rachel looked into Savannah's eyes and saw understanding, acceptance, no judgment. There was no room in that gaze for shame or regret. Meanwhile, Dave was back on duty outside Savannah's house. Last night, he had seen the same woman enter the building but not come out. That could only mean one thing. She had spent the night at Savannah's. Jealousy was eating him up inside. He had paid Savannah thousands of dollars, considered their relationship special, and what did she do? Hanging out with her friends? When he saw the stranger leaving the building in the morning with her hair disheveled and her clothes rumpled, his worst suspicions were confirmed. Dave gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles hurt. He followed the woman to her house in an upscale neighborhood and memorized the address. Then he spent several hours on the internet until he found information about the residents. Tom and Rachel Morgan, 2 children. She was a teacher at a private school. Married, Dave hissed. Savannah seduces married women. This discovery added a new dimension to his rage. He could understand competing with other men. That was a fair fight. But how could he compete with a woman? What could she give Savannah that he couldn't? Dave took out his phone and started dialing Savannah's number, but stopped. He needed to think things through first. He couldn't let his emotions control him. That same day, Tom Morgan noticed a change in his wife's behavior. Rachel came home agitated, distracted, constantly checking her phone. At dinner, she barely touched her food, and when he asked her questions, she answered in monosyllables. "Are you okay?" he asked when the children had gone to bed. "Yes, just tired," Rachel replied, but avoided his gaze. Tom knew his wife well enough to understand that something was going on. Rachel had always been a poor liar. Her tiredness was more like nervousness, and her constant smiles and thoughtfulness spoke volumes. "How's your new friend, Savannah?" Rachel looked up sharply. "Fine. Why?" "No reason. Just wondering what you two have been up to." "The usual. Shopping, talking." Tom nodded, but something in his wife's tone alarmed him. Tomorrow, he would talk to the private investigator the bank sometimes hired to check out suspicious clients. Perhaps he should find out more about this Savannah Drake. Late that night, Savannah lay in a bathtub filled with expensive oils, planning her next moves. Rachel was almost ready. A few more meetings, and she would be completely under her influence. Women were always more emotional in relationships. They were easier to bind to oneself. The only problem was Dave. His calls were becoming more frequent and intrusive. Perhaps it was time to find a replacement. The city was full of lonely men with money. The phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "Hello? Savannah Drake?" The male voice sounded formal. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Tom Morgan. I'm Rachel's husband. I think we need to talk." Savannah was silent for a long time, holding the phone to her ear. Tom Morgan's voice was calm, but there was steel in it. She knew that tone. It was how men who were used to being in control spoke. "What do you want to talk about, Mr. Morgan?" she finally replied, stepping out of the shower and throwing on a silk robe. "I think you know exactly what I mean. Tomorrow, 2 o'clock, Central Park Cafe on Main Street. Come alone." He hung up without waiting for a reply. Savannah smiled. Tom clearly thought he could intimidate her like just another subordinate at the bank. He was wrong. The next day, at 1:30, Dave Collins parked across from Central Park Cafe. He had been following Savannah for several days, studying her routine. That morning, he had seen her meet with a middle-aged man in an expensive suit. Their conversation was tense. Even from a distance, it was obvious. Dave didn't know who the man was, but jealousy was eating away at him. How many more secrets did Savannah have? How many men and women were passing through her bed while he naively believed in their special connection? At 2 o'clock, Savannah entered the cafe. Tom Morgan was already sitting at a corner table studying documents on his tablet. He looked up when she approached, and Savannah saw cold determination in his eyes. "Mr. Morgan," she said, sitting down across from him, maintaining her impeccable posture. "You look exactly as I imagined. Let's skip the pleasantries." Tom put away his tablet and looked her in the eyes. "Do you know that my wife is married?" "I do." Savannah didn't deny the obvious. "And do you know that she's unhappy?" Tom clenched his jaw. "What do you want from her?" "Nothing special, just friendship between adult women." "Don't lie to me." Tom's voice grew quieter but more dangerous. "I hired a private investigator. I know who you are and what you do. an escort who decided to play with someone else's family. Savannah leaned back in her chair. So he had done his research. That complicated things, but it didn't make the situation hopeless. Your wife is a grown woman, Mr. Morgan. She makes her own choices. Choices? Tom laughed without humor. What choice does a housewife have against a professional manipulator? Maybe the problem isn't me, but the fact that you've forgotten how to make your wife happy. Tom leaned forward and Savannah saw real anger in his eyes. Listen to me carefully. Stay away from my family. Otherwise, I'll make sure your business becomes public knowledge. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. I have connections in the police, in City Hall, and business circles. One word and your comfortable life is over. Savannah smiled her most charming smile. You know, Mr. Morgan, your wife is right. You really think that everything can be bought or intimidated. But some things are not for sale. She stood up, picked up her purse, and headed for the exit. Tell Rachel I'm waiting for her call. Tom watched her go, clenching his fists. This woman had just openly challenged him. No one did that and got away with it. Outside the cafe, Dave saw Savannah step out onto the street. Her face was satisfied, as if she had just won an important battle. The man in the suit appeared a few minutes later, his face grim. Dave followed Savannah to her apartment. All day long, he had been running through different scenarios of how he would talk to her. He wanted answers. He wanted to understand what was going on. He wanted the Savannah who belonged only to him back. At 6:30 in the evening, he gathered his courage and went up to her apartment. Dave knew the code to the building. Savannah had given it to him a month ago in case of an emergency. He rang the doorbell. Savannah opened the door, surprise written all over her face. Dave, you didn't say you were coming. We need to talk, he said, entering the apartment without waiting for an invitation. Savannah closed the door and turned to face him. She was dressed casually in a silk blouse and skinny jeans, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. Even so, she looked stunning. What do you want to talk about? She asked, walking into the living room. About us, about what's going on between us. Savannah poured herself some wine from an open bottle. She didn't offer Dave any. Nothing has changed between us, Dave. Don't lie to me, he raised his voice. I know you have someone else. I've seen you with her. Savannah slowly turned to face him. There was no surprise or embarrassment in her eyes, only cold irritation. Have you been following me? I was worried. You've been so distant, always canceling our dates. And you decided you had the right to spy on me? Dave took a step toward her. I have a right to know. I pay you, I take care of you, You pay for services, Savannah interrupted, her voice turning icy. Don't confuse that with a relationship. The words hit Dave like a slap in the face. Services? Is that all I am to you? What else could you be? Savannah shrugged. You're a client, Dave. One of many. No. He shook his head. There's something special between us. You said so yourself. I said what you wanted to hear. It's my job. Dave felt the world crumbling around him. All those moments of closeness, understanding, tenderness, all a lie? What about that woman, the married teacher? Do you take money from her too? Savannah laughed. Rachel? No, I don't take money from her. She gives me something better. What? Entertainment. Savannah's eyes flashed with malice. You should have seen how she begged me to stay with her, how she cried with gratitude. It was refreshing. Something snapped in Dave's head. All the pain, humiliation, and despair of the last few weeks turned into blind rage. You play with people, he hissed. Of course I do. Savannah took a sip of wine. And everyone gets what they came for. You get the illusion of love, she gets adventure, and I get what I need. What do you need? Power, Savannah replied simply. Power over pathetic people like you. Dave didn't remember grabbing the bottle from the coffee table. He didn't remember swinging it. All he remembered was the sound of breaking glass and Savannah's scream. She fell, hitting her head on the edge of the marble fireplace. Blood flowed across the light-colored carpet, and Savannah didn't move. Dave stood over her, breathing heavily, still clutching the broken bottle in his hand. For a few seconds, he couldn't believe what had happened. Then reality hit him with full force. Savannah? He knelt down beside her. Savannah, wake up! but her eyes stared into space, and blood continued to ooze from the wound on her head. Dave touched her neck, checking for a pulse. Nothing. Panic overwhelmed him. He stood up, looked around, trying to figure out what to do. He had to call an ambulance, the police, but then Dave began frantically wiping his fingerprints off everything he had touched. Glasses, door handles, everything he could remember. He gathered the broken pieces of the bottle into a plastic bag. In the hallway, he noticed an expensive men's jacket hanging on a coat rack. Next to it were shoes that were clearly not women's. Another client or a lover. On the coffee table lay expensive jewelry, a bracelet that Dave didn't recognize, and a watch that was clearly men's. In the bedroom, he found even more gifts: perfume, silk scarves, expensive cosmetics. All this suggested that Savannah had many admirers, many people who might want to kill her. That was his only hope. Dave took some expensive jewelry to make it look like a robbery. He turned over a couple of drawers and scattered papers around. Then he remembered the security cameras in the stairwell. He knew the back way out through the garage. Savannah had shown it to him once. Dave went down the stairs, trying not to think about what he was leaving behind. Only when he was sitting in his car a few blocks from Savannah's house did he allow himself to realize the magnitude of what had happened. He had killed her. He had killed the woman he loved. Dave took out his phone with trembling hands and dialed the emergency number. 911, what's happening? I want to report a possible crime, he said, changing his voice to a lower tone than usual. At Platinum Towers, apartment 2304, something seems to be wrong. I heard screams. He hung up and threw the SIM card into a storm drain. Detective Mike Harris arrived at the scene 20 minutes after the call. He was 38 years old and had 15 years of experience in the police force. For the past 5 years, he had been working on homicides in the Fairfield Major Crimes Division. The Platinum Towers luxury apartment complex was not a typical place for crime. Security guards, surveillance cameras, and thorough visitor screening usually deterred criminals. What do we have? Harris asked Sergeant Davis, who was the first to arrive at the scene. A woman, 28 years old, Savannah Drake, found dead in her apartment, blunt head trauma, lots of blood. They went up to the 23rd floor. The apartment was luxurious, panoramic windows, designer furniture, works of art. But now that beauty was marred by signs of violence. Savannah lay by the fireplace in a pool of dried blood. Shards of a wine bottle lay nearby. Some drawers had been ransacked, papers scattered across the floor. Looks like a robbery, Davis remarked. Harris looked around more closely. The expensive electronics were untouched. The jewelry in the bedroom had also been left alone. Only a few items were missing, and none of them particularly valuable. A strange robbery, he muttered. The burglar left behind a TV worth $10,000 but took a bracelet worth $500. The crime scene investigator was already photographing the scene. Harris approached the body and crouched down beside it. A single blow, he said aloud. Strong, precise, either a very angry man or a very lucky one. On the coffee table, he noticed 2 glasses. One was used, the other was clean. Next to them lay an expensive men's watch. Sergeant, find the building manager. I need the CCTV footage from the last 24 hours. Harris continued to search the apartment. In the bedroom, he found a veritable treasure trove of gifts. Jewelry, expensive clothes, accessories. All clearly from different men. In the bedside table was a notebook with names and phone numbers. Some were accompanied by notes. Generous, married, jealous, troubled. An escort, Harris realized. That explained the luxurious apartment and the abundance of gifts from men. His phone rang. It was Rachel Morgan's wife, according to the victim's notebook. Detective Harris. This is Rachel Morgan. I heard the news on the radio about Savannah Drake. Is it true? Is she really dead? The woman's voice trembled with tears. Harris frowned. Such an emotional reaction to the death of an acquaintance was unusual. Yes, ma'am, I'm afraid it's true. Were you acquainted with Miss Drake? We were friends. Can I come over? I want to know what happened. Ma'am, I'll need to talk to you as a witness. When was the last time you saw Miss Drake? A long pause. The day before yesterday. We had lunch together. All right, come to the station tomorrow morning. I'll need to take your statement. After the call, Harris was deep in thought. Rachel Morgan's emotional reaction suggested that her relationship with the victim was closer than just friendship. Perhaps that was the key to solving the case. At that moment, Rachel was sitting in her car in the shopping center parking lot, crying. She had heard the news of Savannah's death on the radio while driving home from work. At first, she couldn't believe it. Then she called the police. Savannah was dead. The woman who had turned her world upside down in a matter of weeks would never hug her again, tell her she was special, or make her feel alive. Rachel knew she had lost more than just a lover. She had lost a part of herself that she had only just begun to discover. With Savannah, her hope that life could be different had died. She needed to go home to her husband and children and pretend that nothing had changed. But everything had changed. And now, she had to live with this secret, with this pain, with the knowledge that the happiest moments of her life were in the past. The next morning, Detective Harris studied the CCTV footage in his office. Dozens of people had entered and left the building over the past 24 hours, but most of them were residents or couriers. "Here's something interesting," he said to Sergeant Davis, pointing to the screen. "See this man? He enters the building at 6:47 p.m., but he's not there when it closes." The recording showed a middle-aged man in a dark jacket. He confidently entered the code on the intercom, as if he had been there before. Maybe he left through a side exit? Possibly. Check the cameras in the garage. Harris continued watching. At 7:23 p.m., a woman left the building. Tall, slim, clearly upset. She walked quickly to her car without looking up. His phone rang. It was the coroner. "Detective, the preliminary autopsy results are in. Death was caused by blunt force trauma to the head, time of death between 7 and 8 p.m., a single blow with a wine bottle, after which the victim fell and hit her head on the fireplace." Any signs of a struggle? Minimal. The attack may have been sudden. Harris jotted the information down in his notebook. The killer knew the victim well enough to enter her apartment without resistance. This narrowed the circle of suspects. At 10 in the morning, Rachel Morgan arrived at the station. Harris recognized her immediately. She was the same woman from the surveillance footage. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands were shaking. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Morgan," Harris said, leading her into the interrogation room. "Tell me about your relationship with Savannah Drake." Rachel clasped her hands together. "We met a month ago at a charity event. We started dating and spending time together." "How often did you see each other?" 2 or 3 times a week. We went to cafes, shopping, and the theater." Harris watched her reactions. The woman was clearly hiding something. "Mrs. Morgan, do you understand the seriousness of the situation? I need the whole truth about your relationship with the victim." Rachel covered her face with her hands. "We were more than friends." "A romantic relationship?" "Yes," she whispered. "I was cheating on my husband with Savannah." Harris nodded. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. "Did your husband know about this?" He suspected. He had recently started asking questions about Savannah. "When was the last time you saw Miss Drake?" "The day before yesterday, on Tuesday. We had lunch at La Bristol." "How did she look? Was she upset about anything?" Rachel thought for a moment. "She seemed tense. She said she was having problems with one of her clients. Someone was getting too pushy." "Did she give you a name?" "Number, she just said it was a middle-aged man who was mixing business with personal." Harris wrote down the information. "Mrs. Morgan, I need to ask you about last night. Where were you between 7 and 8? "At home. I was cooking dinner and helping the children with their homework." "Who can confirm that?" "My husband, the children. We all had dinner together at 6:30. After Rachel left, Harris studied Savannah's notebook. It contained about 20 names with notes. One name in particular caught his attention: Dave K. Auto repair shop, generous but becoming problematic. Harris found information online about Dave Collins, the owner of the Collins Auto repair shop chain, 45 years old, divorced. The photo matched the man in the surveillance video. In the afternoon, Harris arrived at the auto repair shop's main office. Dave was sitting at his desk trying to focus on his paperwork, but his hands were shaking and images from the previous night were running through his head. "Dave Collins?" An unfamiliar man in a suit peeked through the door. "Yes, that's me. Detective Harris, Fairfield Police Department. Can we talk?" Dave's heart raced, but he tried to remain calm. "Sure. What's this about? Savannah Drake. She's dead. Dave feigned shock. What? How did it happen? Murder, last night, in her apartment. My God. Dave slumped back in his chair. That's terrible. Who would do such a thing? We're trying to find out. I understand you were a client of hers. Dave felt his palms sweat. A client? I don't understand. Mr. Collins, we found the victim's notebook. Your name is in it. Dave realized there was no point in denying it. Yes, we saw each other occasionally, but it was just dinner, going to the theater. When was the last time you saw her? A week ago, maybe longer. Harris watched Dave's reactions. The man was more nervous than he should have been during a routine witness interview. Where were you last night between 7 and 8? At home, watching TV. Can anyone confirm that? No, I live alone. Mr. Collins, I have CCTV footage of a man who looks like you entering the victim's building yesterday at 6:47 p.m. Dave turned pale. That couldn't have been me. I told you. I was at home. Then you won't mind if we search your car and your home? Do you have a warrant? Harris smiled. Innocent people don't usually ask for warrants. Not yet, but I can get one if you insist. Dave knew he was cornered. If the police found a broken wine bottle in the trash or clothes with bloodstains, okay, he said quietly. I'll tell you the truth. Harris turned on the tape recorder. I'm listening. I was at Savannah's last night, but when I got there, she was already dead. Why didn't you call the police? I was scared. I knew how it would look. What did you do in the apartment? Nothing. I saw her body and left right away. Harris shook his head. Mr. Collins, the forensic team will find your fingerprints in the apartment. It's better to tell the whole truth now. Dave closed his eyes. The game was over. We had an argument, he began. She said terrible things, that I meant nothing to her, that she was playing with me. And then what happened? I got angry. I grabbed a bottle and I don't remember exactly. When I came to, she was lying by the fireplace. Did you kill Savannah Drake? A long pause. Yes. Harris arrested Dave on suspicion of murder. A search of his home turned up the victim's jewelry and blood-stained clothing. 3 days later, the news of the arrest was in all the local newspapers. Rachel read the article while sitting in her car in front of the school and cried. Justice had been served, but it didn't bring Savannah back. Tom found the newspaper on the kitchen table and read the article. The photo of the arrested man left no doubt. It was the man he had seen near Central Park Cafe. Rachel, he called to his wife. She entered the kitchen with red eyes. I need to tell you something. Tom pointed to the newspaper. I met with her, with Savannah. I warned her to stay away from our family. Rachel looked at him in horror. What did you do? Nothing. Just talked. But if the police find out, did you threaten her? Tom nodded. I said I'd ruin her business if she didn't leave you alone. Rachel slapped him across the face. You had no right. It was my choice. Choice? Tom rubbed his cheek. What choice? She used you. Maybe, but it was my life. Rachel ran out of the house, slamming the door behind her. Tom was left alone in the kitchen, realizing he had lost his wife forever. Dave Collins's trial took place 6 months later. The jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. The sentence was 20 years in prison. Only Rachel was present at the sentencing. She looked at the man who had killed Savannah and felt neither anger nor satisfaction, only emptiness. After the trial, she sat down on a bench outside the courthouse and took a photo out of her purse. Savannah was smiling at her with that same charming smile that had once turned Rachel's world upside down. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. Detective Harris came out of the courthouse and saw a woman crying. Mrs. Morgan? Rachel looked up. Detective, thank you for your work. Justice has been served. Yes, she said, putting the photo back in her purse. But that won't bring her back. Harris sat down next to her on the bench. You know, in this job, you often see the worst in people. But sometimes you see love. Real love. Rachel looked at him in surprise. Whatever you had with Miss Drake, it meant a lot to you. Don't let how it ended overshadow the good memories. Rachel nodded and stood up. I have to get home. To your husband? No. She shook her head. I filed for divorce last week. It's time to start a new life. Harris watched her leave. Another broken family, another life scarred by crime. But maybe Rachel Morgan would find her way to happiness. Dave Collins was serving his sentence in state prison. In the first few months, he often thought about Savannah, about how things could have been different. Gradually, the pain subsided, replaced by a dull regret. He understood that he had killed not only Savannah, but also a part of himself, the man who once believed in love and hope. Now, all that remained was to serve his sentence and live with the knowledge that a moment of blind rage had destroyed several lives forever. The story ended as stories of passion and obsession often do, in a tragedy that no one could have prevented. Savannah Drake had played with fire for too long, until the fire burned everyone around her. But life went on. Rachel began a new chapter, free from lies and compromises. She would never forget the woman who showed her that life could be bright and passionate, and maybe one day she would find the courage to love again.